is. This is amazing. It's like having a big end of year party.
But there's no alcohol.
I was going to say, I don't know what type of parties you host, but
yeah, this is not a recruitment party.
Pretty lame ones, okay? Pretty lame ones. What you can't see out of frame is that Ez and I have actually got champagne and all sorts of
I had to get this up on that screen.
In classic Ez fashion, he's just finishing stuffing a McDonald's in, so.
It's going to catch up with me one day, isn't it?
It is, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about that day. Everyone else works so hard for how they look, and you are the opposite. How are we doing on numbers?
About 90 in at the moment, Laura. I reckon another minute or so, and then we can get working.
Awesome. I might then just flick to the next slide, just to run through some reminders before we get started, and just for stragglers coming in. So please mute your microphone. We use the normal version of Zoom rather than the webinar version. So obviously, if it's okay with you and you feel comfortable to have your camera on, if you are, you know, like Ez, carrying in a McDonald's or something, and you don't feel comfortable having your screen on, totally get it. It just makes a difference for us to be able to see faces. We just prefer it a little bit more personal. Mute your microphone unless you have a question. And any questions sent via the chat room, we'll just wait until a few accumulate, and once we finish a segment, we'll try and get through them. We do have quite a lot of, we always say this, we never ever know really how much our content is. It just depends on if one of us goes on a rant about something. We think we probably will go up to the full hour. So what we'll say to you guys is, if you do, we're going to hang around. This is basically how we live our lives anyway. So we'll hang around on the Zoom for 15 minutes afterwards. And if anyone wants to stay on and ask us anything specific or wants to carry on the conversation, please feel free to stay on and hang around and have a chat with us. But if you do have anything you want answered as we move through, just pop it in the chat and one of us will keep an eye on it and just shout out questions and give you guys some quick fire answers.
If one of us does go on a tangent, the other one will hopefully rein it in.
Yeah, what we normally do is like just flick the slide along. It's like a nudge to the person to stop talking. So we're at 12:34, and I'm very conscious of everyone's time, and especially at this time of year. Don't know about you guys, it's manic, and everyone I speak to is crazy. So we just want to make sure we're packing as much value in as possible. So I reckon as we get started,
I'll keep an eye on the waiting room and just carry on people in for a few minutes.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. We, as usual, are very excited, a little bit nervous. We love holding these webinars, and our aim for them is just to give you guys as much value as possible. And we hope, coming into 2022 and looking at your hiring strategy, that this will just give you some food for thought. So we'll just start with very brief introductions in a bit of a structure. So our agenda is to look at just a bit of an intro into us, who we are, what we do. We won't spend too long on that. We just want to touch on, why hire rookies and why we think this is fundamental to your growth strategy of 2022. We'll look at pre-hiring, what you need to consider. We'll touch on induction programs and what we think you need to think about in setting up those first 2 weeks. And then we'll look at developing training programs and how that training should actually be delivered, and a bit of a plan or a focus for your rookies, your new recruiters' first 3 months in your business. So that's kind of the format of where we are going. We'll just give you, I guess, a brief overview. Ez, do you just want to talk a little bit about you for people who don't know you?
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief because I can see people here that have attended our webinars before. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ez Khan. I started a business called Spencer Lane and still run that with a business partner. We are a rhetoric and digital marketing recruitment agency, and I've been running that for the last 2 years. Prior to that, my career over 80%
I'm
of
on a
my
webinar, so
career has all been in recruitment. So yeah, so overall 12 years in recruitment, have developed multiple sort of cold desks, have developed teams, a large portion of those teams that I've grown sort of were homegrown, so rookies. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So for those of you who don't know me or haven't met me before, my name is Laura. I have got 15 years within agency recruitment. 6 years ago, I co-founded a business called Lotus People Recruitment, which is a business support agency. And for the last 4 years, I've been running a business called Hopes Consult, where I go into organizations and provide training and development workshops and learning and development programs for agency recruiters. The predominant focus of the last 4 years has been in working with organizations to support them with developing their rookie programs. This year, I've run in excess of 10 formal rookie programs. And my strategy in growing my own business and in businesses I worked in previously was always a grow your own approach. So I've got rookies that I've brought through that are, billing in excess of 1 million. And it's always been the way that I have developed talent within my business and grown businesses, as we all know, because of the skills shortage and the scarcity of experienced recruiters, and for a lot of other reasons as well. So that's a little bit about, I guess, my background. And, Hume Scope was developed a year ago. It's been a year in operation formally, and Ez and I have been working together to run training programs for about 18 months. Between us, we've got over 25 years of experience. Both of us still actively recruit. And our courses, or what we do with Hume Scope, is run courses, online courses across automation, technology, business development, branding, content, client engagement, just to how to get recruiters to really leverage those additional skills that are so useful for the modern recruiter. We've run training around retained search. And next year, we're actually launching our own online rookie program, which is kind of the inspiration for running this webinar, based on a lot of the conversations we've been having with clients this year of, okay, well, how are they hiring? And if we are looking at developing a rookie strategy, what do we need to think about? And so, our formal rookie program will complement any internal structure and development that you set up. And this webinar today really came off the back of that, just to introduce to you how we have gone about hiring rookies in the businesses that we've worked in, and all the factors that you need to take into consideration with that. Do you have anything on that you wanted to add, Ez?
Oh, I just noticed in the last picture that I'm wearing the exact same outfit. I do have more shirts than this one.
Yeah. I only have like 2 webinar friendly tops. It's this one and the one in the slide. So it was a 50-50.
And just a quick mention to our 2 sponsors who helped us put this webinar together. So Aircall, they're both software providers that we utilize here at Spencer Lane. So Aircall is a VoIP phone system that we utilize. I think it's great. You may have seen a tech talk that I did on it a few weeks ago, but overarchingly it syncs with your database, Bullhorn or Job Edit, and saves recordings automatically to those records, which I think is great. And Bullhorn, most of you would have heard of Bullhorn. It's an awesome CRM. We've been utilizing it for 6 years and would highly recommend it. But yeah, thank you guys from there.
All right, so let's get into it. So you're all here for a reason. So we won't spend too long on this slide at all, right? If anyone's turned up and they're like, oh, this is what it's about, and you're not interested, obviously feel free to jump off. But I think, what we've seen in the last 18 months in the market, more so than we ever have before, is that squeeze of hiring experienced talent. And that's for a number of reasons. And I'm sure, you guys have had that conversation to death internally and with business advisors and that side of things. So everyone's joined us today because they are interested in some way, shape or form of developing in new recruiters or hiring new recruiters in their business and looking at how they provide that development to them. So why hire rookies? Regardless of whether we're in a short market, there's a huge amount of value. It is one of the most extreme candidate short markets in history. But for me, the reason I've always hired rookies or junior recruiters within my business is that I can train them in my own way and get them really specifically operating within best practice, because there are no habits that have been learned elsewhere. So for me, a big part of hiring new recruiters is that they're bringing in, the right behaviors and the right skill sets, and then I can train them and mold them into ideally what I see as a good and excellent and awesome recruiter. It's a limited investment, and we're just talking in business owner language here, and being frank, we know how much it costs us to hire experienced talent, and we're very aware of how much it costs us to hire new talent. And if you get this right, it's the absolute maximum return. And if you can get these people flourishing in your business within that first year, you're going to see that return very, very quickly. A big thing for us in hiring in our own businesses is hiring based on values. And a lot of what I hope and what we do with our clients is coach around, hiring based on values and training the skill sets rather than the behaviors. And I think we all know in recruitment that a lot of this job is learned by doing. There's a level of theory, absolutely, that we can apply to it. But ultimately, we learn by being on the tools and being able to take those theoretical learnings and put them into practical practice. And so if you've got the right behaviors there and the right values, you should be able to train the skill set.
And I can't tell, we all see value in training rookies, and I can't tell you, I obviously work across rec to rec, so all of my clients are recruitment agencies. And one thing that is unanimous across those clients, they always ask for, ideally, someone that's been trained from the bigger agencies. And the reason being, those larger agencies can put structure in place for their rookies, and they take them through a solid, well thought out program that involves discipline, structure, and those sort of foundations are invaluable in your career. I know Laura and I both have been through larger agency environments where we've had that structured training, and I still utilize the things that I learned 12 years ago at Office Angels today.
Absolutely. And it's like, okay, how do you, in an agency that has maybe 10 or 20 people, actually replicate that and do it internally? We've got a couple of poll questions that we'd love you guys just to jump on and answer, which will be really, really valuable and really useful for us. And hopefully will give you some insight as well. But, this is big for us. What Ez and I see in the industry, a lack of structure internally, especially in those first 3 months, and a lack of formal training are the top 2 reasons that rookies leave the industry. This, throw them in and see if it sticks approach is highly detrimental to the future success of someone. And so really you need to think about, how am I going to provide that level of support, structure, training, development in those first 3 months to ensure that I'm providing this person with access to success, essentially. So Ez, do you want to touch on the poll questions? Are they there?
Oh, they've already been launched, Laura.
Oh, you've done it.
We've got the results through and everything, love.
Bloody hell.
There's still some coming through, but thank you everyone for completing. So the first question, who's hired rookies this year? So 75% hired rookies, and of those, who has put them through a formal training program? 42% have put them through a formal training program and 58% have not.
Right.
To be completely honest, I thought that would be higher on the nose.
Is in higher on the haven't hired or higher on the haven't put through formal?
Haven't put through a formal.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So we're looking at what, 50%?
Yeah, it's coming out roughly 50-50.
But then we're also then looking at 50% who haven't had formal training.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. And we won't, I'd love to collect more data around this, and maybe that is something I'll do in future, because I think it would be really interesting to then see off the back of those of you who had done formal and those of you who hadn't, what your success rate was looking like with your rookies. But I think that's really interesting. Like 50% of people have invested in formal training, which does leave 50, and that sounds high, but that means 50% of us are kind of figuring it out as we go. And I think for a lot of agencies at the moment, hiring rookies is a fairly new approach. hence running this webinar, and hence why I guess so many of you are here, because it's like, okay, well, what potentially does that look like for us?
Yeah.
So with that, let's talk about pre-hiring, or, you know, going into 2022. These are the top things that we would, I guess, be considering when you're thinking of, or when you are bringing rookies into your business. The first thing is, what are the behaviors and values that I'm looking for? Because in my opinion, as I mentioned before, those are the absolute most important things. If you can match values with your organizational values, and you can look for the right behaviors, and at the end of this slide deck, we're just going to give you guys a list of what we consider as the top behaviors, or the, you know, based on a lot of research we've done, and the most successful rookies that we have brought through, and know what are the main traits we see in them. So we can go through that at the end. But I absolutely would be looking at that behavior and value piece as priority.
100%. Some of the most successful recruiters that I've worked with and trained have all been, a large portion of them have been rookies who now run their own businesses, and they've been highly successful because the behaviors and values were there. Natural curiosity, all the things that I was looking for at the time, they ticked, and they didn't have everything. They didn't tick every box, but they had the right behaviors and values that I thought would lead them to success.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest battle for sure. And then you want to look at skill sets, and with skill sets, you know, depending on the industry you work in, it might be industry experience, because as we know, the more the quicker a rookie can align themselves to the industry that they're recruiting in, and actually understand the roles that they're recruiting, the more likely they are to have success early on. So hiring people from industry is super important. I have never hired a rookie that comes from a sales background, which will probably shock a lot of people on this call. But for me, sales is such a small part of recruitment, and you can teach people to negotiate, and you can teach people to develop relationships. But I actually don't personally hire people who have come from a sales background, because that doesn't necessarily align with how I run my agency. I run my agency as a consultancy, which is highly focused on relationship development, right? So skill sets, it could be, you know, I would look at strong customer service experience, great project management skills, maybe industry experience. I think there's a lot that we should be considering here that doesn't just fall into that natural direct sales fit. 180 or 360, where I see a lot of success of recruitment agencies having, is actually bringing consultants in on a 180 basis, stripping out the sales part of the role for the first 3 to 6 months, and actually building up their ability to do the job before they start selling the job.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's where I've seen the most success with rookies too. I think it can be quite overwhelming, and very few people can really hit the ground running on the client development side as well as the candidate generation side. And I think if your agency is set up, and most agencies at the moment have got excess of work on, and so you've now got the ability to bring someone in on a 180 basis and actually take away that element of business development, because that naturally does scare people. And it doesn't need to want to actually understand the other half of the job, which is the candidate side.
Because how you need to be able to communicate it, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say I wouldn't teach them the theory of it, but I would want them hungry for it before I put them into it.
Yeah. And
then some other, I guess, pre-hiring considerations. Do you have career pathways? And this is a whole nother conversation, and something that I'd like to explore next year as a webinar. But do you have career pathways for people in your business, and can they clearly see what their path to success would look like, and how they actually progress through over 12 months? Same alongside that, do you have a standard activity and billings expectations for that new recruiter in their first 3 to 6 months? And is it clear and transparent what you are expected of them from day one, so that you can really work closely with them to meet those standards?
And are they realistic? I would just add on that expectation side.
Yeah.
Because we've all heard of the one rookie that's come in and absolutely smashed the lights out. They've done 100K, great. That's the outlier. it takes time to develop people into these roles. So I think the realistic expectations internally really need to be talked through.
100K a quarter,
Yeah.
10 client meetings a week, 100 BD calls. Get them on the phone, day one.
Go.
Developing an induction and training program, and we're going to obviously spend the majority of this session talking about that, but do you have the resources for that? And my first question to you guys is, I would absolutely be looking at internal and external resources to complement each other, and there are a number of reasons why external resources are just as important as internal resources, and why internal are just as important as external, and the two need to work hand in hand, but you need to make sure that you've got the resources in place. Do you have a way of tracking development? How are you going to measure their success with them? And from a leader perspective, to ensure that it's you're getting your return on your investment, and you're able to actually work with someone to measure their performance. And then another thing that you want to consider, because this is not a solo journey as a leader in an agency, if you are bringing rookies into an agency, it's got to be a team effort. I would be looking at identifying who your subject matter experts are within the organization that are going to be able to help take these rookies on the journey, because there is no way as a leader you can be fully responsible for a rookie's development and training. Like, it just doesn't work. And this is where we see rookies being kind of flung on courses, but without the internal structure to support that. And then they're expected to kind of come back from a course and know exactly how to do the job. Whereas what we're looking for is this complement of formal training on the job, on the tools, and then able to back that up, working really, really closely with your SMEs within the business that can help support their development internally.
I think that's a really important one on the identifying those subject matter experts and being quite self-critical and having some awareness of your agency and who's got the strengths in which areas, and breaking that up, because it does lighten the load. And we won't be subject matter experts on every single part of the recruitment process. I know there's a few things within the process that I'm not great at, and there's no way in hell I'd train someone on those parts of the process. So just identifying what you actually are a subject matter expert on, and identifying those people within your organizations.
Yeah. Matt's just put a question in. Matt, this is a bit of an awkward one, because Matt has just asked, is there any feedback from participants on best external recruitment training providers? Matt, that is our job. And so if everyone is okay with it, I just prefer that you didn't comment as to additional training providers whilst we were in the webinar. And if anyone wants to catch up with Matt with any referrals, maybe you guys could connect on LinkedIn and take that offline. Sorry, I just might be a little bit uncomfortable for me to see all my competitors coming up in the chat feed of a webinar that I am hosting, if that's okay. Okay. All right. So let's talk about induction programs. First 2 weeks in the business. You need a formal structure that includes daily structure for each of those first 10 days. And at the end of each day needs to be a wrap up with their direct line manager. I would want a rookie to walk in on day one and have their full first 2 weeks planned out. And it doesn't mean there isn't downtime, and it doesn't mean that things won't change, but you do need to be that structured and detailed with them, because there is no way in those first 2 weeks, in my opinion, that they're going to be able to be left alone on the tools. And this is why you need to spread the love across your agency to ensure that you're not spending 2 weeks every time you hire a rookie off your role, right? So we need to really proactively plan that agenda out to make sure that those 2 weeks are structured, and you've got someone covered for that entire period. Most rookies don't actually understand what an agency does. And so if you're not currently doing this when you bring rookies into your business at the moment, I would be holding a session with them around welcome to agency recruitment. Here is all of our terminology. These are all the acronyms used in the industry. This is how you make money out of contracts. This is the difference between ABN and PAYG. This is how you make a margin on temp. This is how you calculate a temp fee. This is how you calculate perm. Welcome to Fair Work Australia. These are the modern awards. This is the stuff that we make an assumption that people know. And if you're hiring junior recruiters, they might not have even registered with an agency before. And so we need to make sure that we are giving them that full scale picture of this is how I fit in to industry within a recruitment agency.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important one, because I think we assume because we've been doing it for so long, they would understand like even simple things like PAYG and ABN. I remember I had a senior consultant a few years ago who had no idea what PAYG and ABN meant. I was like, you're 7 years in, how do you not know this? But yeah, so we can't assume that they know the basics, because what are basics to us, we've been doing for 10 years. And so those little sort of acronyms that people use, all of that sort of stuff that they will utilize over their careers, that sort of stuff, good to get out in the first few weeks.
Yeah. In fact, guys, I actually have put together an acronym. I've got a 2-page cheat sheet of acronyms and recruitment jargon for new recruiters. So if anyone wants that, just actually, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, like pop me a message and I'll send that across to you. I remember my first recruitment role, I was in formal training with Crone Corkill in London. And you had to go around and introduce yourselves. And they were like, just introduce who you are, like what team you're going to be working in. And like, I was like, my name's Laura, and like, I'm going to be, you know, I'm here to recruit. Like I had no idea. And they were like, are you temp or perm? It's like, I don't know. I don't even know what that means. Like I've never temped before. Like I had zero idea of how a recruitment agency was structured. Okay. So that is a really nice first session to have with them. And another first session to have in that first couple of weeks is a presentation on how would they sell your agency, your USPs, your history, your achievements. Like, don't just give them the bare basics. We were set up 10 years ago. We did this, we did this. Give them facts, tangible things. This is how many roles we've placed in your particular area in the last 10 years. These are the verticals that we specialize in. These are some of our biggest clients. You should be doing presentations on each of your clients with them. Like you need to get them across how they're going to sell your agency, because they're going to obviously need to be selling it to candidates and to clients, right? So you need to get on top of that stuff really, really quickly with them.
Yeah. More importantly, why the intro to agency recruitment as a whole is so important is if you jump straight to the USPs, they don't have a comparison to what other agencies are doing. So to talk them through what the standard is across the industry, then going through your USPs and how you compare and how you can actually compete against the others is really important.
Yeah. Then the kind of givens, right? Meet and greet with each team member, take them through an org chart, introduction to software systems and tools. And, you know, that stuff needs to be intro level. I wouldn't overwhelm them with that. I would just make sure they understand the tech stack that you use and they're starting to get some training around that. Processes and procedures, like this is how we do things around here, just in terms of the day-to-day. How do I apply for annual leave? What time do I get to go on break? Just the basics, right? I mean, no, I'm talking real fundamentals now, but we just want to make sure that this is all built in so that after that 2 weeks, you know, we're winding them up to watch them go. An introduction or a presentation to their desk, their industry, their vertical, and then free time to actually research that. And even if that's presenting it back to you, their findings, but actually getting them autonomously to go out there and find information that will complement their learnings. And then I would make sure in that first 2 weeks, they've had an overview of what their first 3 months is going to look like, which we will talk about, including any training they're going to go through, the activity levels that you want to see out of them, and some targets that you're going to set them. That might not have context for them at this point, but from day one, from the first 2 weeks, they have an understanding of the expectations. From there, what you're also going to have a look at, and we will talk about this a little bit more, but what you need to start doing in that first 2 weeks is introducing your 360 recruitment training and any commercial training. And we'll talk about that next as to what we think that should look like.
I know it's so tempting in the first few weeks just to get your rookies up and running on the actual job. It's so tempting, but I think that can really overwhelm rookies. It's actually detrimental, I think. And I know you agree with that, Laura. So getting that sort of basics out of the way and making sure you stick to that induction program is key before you actually get them to start sort of developing on the fundamentals.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And guys, just feel free as well. Yeah, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat. Okay, so developing training. And this is where I do, and I know, right, I'm biased. I am going to say this, I'm an external trainer. So I'm gonna call it because I am. But this is where I do think you need to think about a blended approach. What can we do internally, and what do we want to focus our time and energy on internally? And what do we maybe need to utilize some external resources for, depending on a number of factors, our time, subject matter experts, just the format, the objectivity of external training. There's a number of things, but I would be looking at a blended approach in all of the areas of training. The full 360 process. And these are by no means like one module. Within here, as you guys are aware, there is so much scope: candidate sourcing, screening, interviewing, the actual process, job brief to placement. That for me can take a whole day worth of training just on that process. BD, all of the prep and research that goes into that, the actual execution of it, call cycles, meetings, account management. There's that full 360 process that you will need to consider giving them formal training on, not just on the desk training. And we'll talk about why on the next slide, but there needs to be a formality to this for them to learn this from a best practice perspective. On the commercial, and I know you've got a point to make on that, as on the commercial side of things, I would be looking at what are we doing to maximize on their industry and market knowledge. Maybe there are external resources, again, external training courses that you might need to consider in trying to grow their industry knowledge. I would be looking at their candidate vertical and role type. How can we get them across that? And then the other commercial element for every modern recruiter, we need to be looking at developing your online presence. How are they going to develop their brand? How do they interact with clients, candidates, colleagues across LinkedIn and other tech platforms? So there is a lot to think about in terms of developing the training. And it looks, you know, if you can put it onto one slide, that's how it looks. But this is, there's a wealth in there that you'll need to get across.
And I think the sort of fundamentals of recruitment are the same across every single agency, or most agencies, like candidate sourcing. The process is fairly similar from an overarching point of view, but then you'll have your own ways of doing things. And I think that often gets lost. And so what I find in agencies is one person will be doing sourcing this way, and then another one's doing it this way, and there's not a lot of cohesiveness across the business. And the suggestion there would be to actually map out a candidate's experience with your organization. So how do they come to the organization from apply? What happens there in every single touch point that is made with said candidate, right through to placement and follow-up and checking in? What are those different touch points? And then you can develop your training around that in each part of that touch point. And the same goes for the client side. What happens when we prospect a client? What information do they get? Is it stock standard? If it isn't, how is it personalized? Who does what part? There's so many different nuances to every single agency that I think you need to absolutely map out both of those experiences for candidate and client, and then develop your training around that, because there will be personalization for each agency.
And then the beauty of that is that you can provide best practice training. So they understand the context, the psychology, the theory around it. Then you can apply, you know, the Spencer Lane way or the Hume Scope way to it. You know, how does that best practice translate into your organization? And then you've got the practical element of learning that. And that 3-tier approach for me is absolutely fundamental. In an ideal world, best practice, best recruiters on the planet do this, and the reason they do it is this, and you cover up the psychology and the theory of the learning. This is how we do it, and this is how we have, Hume scoped it. This is how we've developed our own way of doing that. And then how do we actually get them to implement this so that the learnings are there? And I feel like, is it the next slide? It's like the only time we've ever used our company name in context. Like, we've been waiting all year to do it, finally. So like the reason we called Hume Scope, the scope bit, it was an add-on and we just thought it sounded cool, right? That's genuinely the truth. But David Hume was a psychologist who specialized in looking at how human beings learn. And a quote of his that really resonated with us and I when we were developing the business, and something that we are really passionate about with training, is the process of experiential learning. And all human knowledge derives solely from experience, right? That's the whole basis of Hume Scope. So what we mean with that is that anything that you teach these guys, there has to be a process of learning the theory and then implementing that theory so that they have experienced the learning and it's embedded. And so whether you decide to use external providers, and if you are using external providers and they're not, I definitely ask them how they do this, because I get asked this question as a trainer all the time, like, how do we make sure that what they learn they actually implement? And I'm going to take you guys through our process to do that. So whether you set up your own internal training or whether you're utilizing an external trainer to do some of your more formal 360 process stuff, the way that we would set up those modules would be in the following format. Okay, so you would have the theory session, which would be presented by the subject matter expert. It might be by an external trainer, however you want to do it, but they have to learn the theory of why and how they actually do something, and the psychology in recruitment behind that. That for me is fundamental. It's the psychological why as to why things happen in our industry in the way they do. They then need to practice that, right? So role play, interactive workshop, you get them talking, you get them coming up with ideas. If any trainees have ever sat in one of my sessions or with Ez and I, they do just as much talking as we do. You want to pull the answers out of them rather than just provide them. So you do some kind of activity or role play or something to embed the knowledge. And then they then need to move to practical application. So whether that's probably more likely to be then on their desk, how do they actually go away, embed those learnings, implement them, and then we look at feedback and refining them. And so just providing them with the theory and then sending them off to their desk, or just giving them on-desk learning, is actually not suffice. We need to be making sure it's this blended approach of teaching and then embedding those learnings. No.
Oh, I thought you were going to carry on. I was going to say, we've all been or most of us will have been in businesses where you're given a sort of instruction book of how to do something. Someone leads you to it and says, go and read this. Even if you read it, you don't really retain it. I know one of my recruitment roles, they gave me a 100-page booklet on how to utilize the system. And I got through 20 pages. I was like, I have no fucking idea how to use the system. You've given me a booklet that's not sunk in. And that experiential learning, that's how most people learn and retain that info. And I think that feedback is so critical to refine, because naturally people will make mistakes, or they won't do exactly how it's needed to be done.
Yeah. And so when you're looking at setting up, okay, well, our formal 360 training, do we have the capacity and the ability to do this in-house? If yes, amazing. But then set up the modules in this way and pinpoint, identify your subject matter experts that can do this with you. And if you don't, then you work with an external trainer or an external support, or however you want to do it, and just set it up in a similar way so that it is this joint responsibility of the trainer and of the organization to embed those learnings.
Mm.
So your rookie's first 3 months. We've spoken about, inductions. It's that introductory piece. The days are structured. They spend a lot of time with the theory, building their knowledge of the organization, of their desk, of their vertical, of recruitment in general. Then maybe do some shadowing. They're looking at, you know, they're in observation mode, right? Then after that first 2 weeks, we start to bring them into that formal learning environment and their theory, then they're starting to role play, and then they're doing practical application that's supervised, that then they start to refine. So they're on their way. In their first 3 months, we need to be very, very clear on what their weekly KPIs and activity levels are. Even if you are a business that celebrates a 0 KPI environment, that is so unhelpful to your rookies, because if they cannot measure in the first few months of recruitment how productive they are being, or what activities lead to what outcomes, they have 0 chance of being able to improve. And so I understand the need when you're working with experienced consultants, and we've got this real stigma around the phrase KPIs. But if you're working with rookies, you need to be embedding KPIs as a positive, and really getting them excited to work with them, because it's a way of them measuring their success.
Yeah, that's absolutely it, isn't it? They need to know what they need to achieve to be successful. And if the agency isn't providing those goalposts to said consultant, they have absolutely no idea, because one would assume they're not going to be smashing the lights out with billings. So take the financial aspect out of the way at least for the first 3 months. What are they trying to achieve? If it's not a financial goal, then I'd highly recommend not having a financial goal. It needs to be a KPI goal. And yes, for your more experienced consultants, you might not have structured KPIs, and that's fine, because they've been through the ranks. They know what leads to success for them. It's a very different kettle of fish with rookies. They need that.
Yeah, and even targets that do measure their success and their achievements that aren't necessarily financial. Because obviously all rookies are, you know, they're keen to get that first placement in. You know, we all remember that feeling, regardless of how long ago it was, you know, that relief of like, oh my gosh, I can actually do this job. You know, there's like no feeling like it, but we don't want to get them stressed about that from the get-go. And there are so many achievements along the way in that first 3 months that show us their potential to make the placements. The investment has been so much lighter than when we're hiring experienced consultants, that we do have a bit more time to play with. And some people just need a little bit longer to come good. And so think about, what can we measure without measuring placements in that first 3 months that will tell us that this person is on the path to success? And that might be qualifying candidates effectively. It might be closing candidates on roles. If you are going down the BD route, it might be booking client meetings. It's those outcomes that we know will ultimately lead to placements that we want to measure without the pressure of that.
Those will be different agency to agency. We had an agency owner ask us what their rookie KPIs should be, and we can't answer that, because it is different for every agency. It will be dependent on your client base, the fill rates, whether you're working retained, exclusive. All of those different elements will make up what your KPIs should be. And I think if providing your current consultants are utilizing the system, those KPIs should be quite clear. You should know what equals 100K a quarter consultant based on what they've done on the system for the last 2 years. But getting that information out and relaying it to the rookie, again, just that overarching understanding of why they need to hit the KPIs, rather than these are the KPIs, go ahead and hit them. I think bringing them along the journey as to why each KPI is so important to get to that end goal.
Yeah, and keeping that really simple as well. Like, what are the biggest measures of success in your organization? And just track those things with them. And Laura's just asked if we have a KPI spreadsheet template that would help with tracking it. You know, I don't have one on file, but it's definitely a good idea, and getting your rookies actually into the rhythm of reporting very early and getting them filling that out so that they can start to track and measure their success. It would be very, very easy on Excel to be able to pop something together that would enable them to see, you know, their percentages. But I really, in those first 3 months, would get them tracking just 3 things. And that might be the number of candidates they're getting over to consultants roles. It might be the amount of client visits they're booking. It might be the number of first interviews, you know, whatever you celebrate in your business. Look at the action, the activity, rather than the dollar figure associated with it. Daily plans and coaching. Your rookies need to be filling out a day plan at the beginning of every single day in their first 3 months, and you as a leader or their direct line manager needs to be using that day plan as a way to coach them through their day. So you need to have a check-in with them 5-10 minutes in the morning, looking at their day plans and how they're going to structure their time. And as we know, actually learning how to structure your time in recruitment is one of the biggest things. It's spinning plates, right? There's so many elements to it. So actually getting them to plan their day and you provide coaching around that is a really great way to set them up for the day, because we can encourage them to problem solve whilst also supporting them. And then actually having a check-in, again, a check-in point after lunch is super, super important to help realign them for the afternoon. So you want to run the day in 2 sprints with your rookies and never just leave them to it. They need to day plan. They need to decide what their level of activity is in the morning. And then you use that as a way of coaching them, because we're trying to create that sense of autonomy for them to start to be responsible and self-sufficient very early on, whilst providing them with the coaching and the support to do so. We've obviously mentioned it, but in that first 3 months, they need that full 360 landscape and commercial training. So whether you run that over a number of weeks, whether you run that in an intensive, but definitely that needs to be completed in their first 3 months. For the first 3 months of any rookie, I would just be getting them to focus on building up their candidate knowledge and their talent pools. You know, for me personally, I wouldn't get them making sales calls, because how can you sell something that you don't fully understand yet? So that first 3 months is learning. What can they learn from their candidates? How they can perfect their technique, get them really understand proactivity around counter offers, pre-closing, all of that side, get them building up a really nice, healthy list of passive candidates, so that after their 3 months, they can actually go out there and do the job and feel a level of confidence around it. Weekly one-to-ones as a check-in point, fairly informal. But then I would also have a monthly meeting with them in that first 3 months that reviews the previous month and helps them actually plan out their activities, their targets, their forecasts for the month ahead. So again, they're just super, super aligned to what it is that you're expecting of them, and they've got that structure there. And a really nice thing I see a lot of businesses do is just provide them with a senior like buddy in the business, right? Someone who they can go to for kind of support, mentoring, someone who is responsible in an informal way of just giving them a bit of extra support, hand holding, someone that isn't their line manager that they can use as just a bit of an additional person in the business to lean
on. The only other thing I'd add to that is the recognition. If we're moving away from the financial aspect of rookies when putting targets around financials, and if you are going down the road, which we would highly suggest of doing, which is the activity levels and KPIs, and rewarding and recognizing those. So not falling back to what we typically do with senior staff, which is recognizing the high achievers, just making sure that's sort of weaved into your business, certainly for the first few months for rookies, to recognize and reward on KPIs, not the financial end result.
I thought you'd frozen there for a second. You went financial and I was like, oh my God, he's gone. And then you finished your sentence. My screen that froze. Okay. So just in terms of our tips, I feel like I've really hammered this point home, and you know what I'm like is when I get intense about something, but hiring on values and behaviors, train the skill set. This job can be trained. It's why we know that there are not a huge amount of formal qualifications for it. Most of us that learn on the job, but so many people have joined our industry and left in their first 6 months because they were only trained on the job, right? So we want to hire the right values and then train and embed the skill set. I would definitely recommend hiring rookies in pairs. I don't want to make that sound impersonal, but like, if you can do this 2 at a time, one, it maximizes on your time. But also if this is a new venture for you and you are a business that is very lucky to have a strong brand and you hire experienced consultants, as we all remember, being a rookie on your own is very, very lonely. And if you're bringing 2 or 3 through at a time, it can actually be it actually can support their success because they're not feeling like they're in it on their own. And I've seen businesses develop, start to bring rookies into their business, and the first 2, 3 or 4 have not worked out because that rookie is very, very alone and they're looking up to standards that they will not be able to meet. So in bringing a couple of people in together, one, you maximize on your time because you're saving time because you can take them through the training and the experience together. But 2, you just reduce the ostracizing of that person by being in an environment where everyone else is so many steps ahead of them. Developing a blended training program, utilizing internal and external resources. And I just don't mean external recruitment trainers. I mean external resources, industry experts within the space that you recruit. I know so many businesses who, get industry experts in to train their consultants on jargon, acronym. Like there's so much that you can do from an external training perspective that isn't just recruitment training, but also if you don't have the resources to manage that, and it is a massive job building those internal training programs, you might find it more cost effective to utilize something external, but you still need to be doing all of the activity and have the responsibility of embedding those learnings internally. Biggest one for us, focus on support structure and direction and just setting realistic expectations. I think if you did nothing else and you just created a framework for their development and had check-ins every single day and provided that level of hand-holding that was needed at the beginning, rather than operating on this approach of, well, I had to sink or swim and therefore my rookie should too, because that shows character. That for me is not showing character. Everyone learns and responds to different things, and you might be losing talent that could be really, really beneficial to your business and the diversity of your business by just applying this one approach that maybe worked for you or maybe worked for a couple of other team members.
Yeah, and just times have changed, I think, is the important thing. Yeah. Like you could do that 10 years ago, you just can't. And guys, I recruit recruiters for a living. The amount of rookies that I speak to or call us at that 6-month mark, they're enjoying recruitment. They're hating the agencies they're in because they were this sink or swim model of, here's a phone book type, old school recruitment, here it is, go ahead and do it, and you might succeed, you might not. We've got a 60% success rate, and it's, really sad, because these people that I then interview, I'm like, you guys have got amazing natural skill sets, and you would be very good at this job had you had the structured training.
Yeah. Get them confident being able to do the job before they start to sell the job. Often that sales piece is so overwhelming, and rookies, what I hear all the time is like, I don't even fully know what I'm doing yet. How am I meant to sell that to a client? Okay, so it doesn't mean you don't give them the formal context to it and the expectation of when it's coming, but just get them feeling comfortable with, oh my gosh, I can actually do this job, so that they have something to take out to a client base. With training, think Hume. Obviously, we think us, but we mean David Hume in terms of give them as much practice as possible. Role plays, activities, experiential learning, theory in bed, theory in bed, theory in bed is literally how we want to play our training programs. And I think a big one is holding your subject matter experts accountable and creating that level of accountability that this is a joint venture between you as a business leader or owner and your team. And what are you going to do to ensure that your SMEs are accountable to providing that training and development and are being proactive with that?
Just one more thing to add to that, the skills outside of sort of traditional recruitment, very few agencies that I've met over the last few years have, some of them have got really structured training programs. And so they go, this is how you interview a candidate, and the basics of doing the recruitment role. And very few I find have modules around things like influencing. How do you influence people? But things like that also to think about, which are essential to a successful consultant. How do you actually develop people and have modules around that? I think it's really important once they've got the basics down of recruitment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Looked like I wasn't listening because I was typing. Dane, I'm going to come back to your message. Dane said, has you done any training of rookie recruiters, offshore or remote staff? Do you mean kind of VA style recruiters? Or do you just mean in a different place, in a different
VAs. Dan, I've trained quite a number of VAs in my last business, and we've got 2 in this business. It's not something we offer as a training package, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you need to bring them in the same way, though. I think they need to learn in the same way, and I think it's a lot harder. But I think with technology now, you know, you can Zoom someone for the whole day. I mean, Ez and I often spend entire days sat on Zoom whilst we're going about our things. So, you know, you can get them to shadow, you can get them to experience, you get them to role play, you can listen into their calls. Like you can create remote learning environments that feel like the real thing. And so I would be using Zoom or other software that you use to be able to do things in exactly the same way. And I think you just need to be really clear on what you're tracking. And as a leader, you also need to be mindful of how much time you're going to have to spend reviewing work potentially to be able to provide that coaching and training and support. Okay, let's just finish on behaviors to look for. I won't spend too much time talking about this. These are the main behaviors that we look for when we're hiring rookies into our businesses, and that I have seen the most success with. Strong sense of self-awareness and interested in their own personal development. The best recruiters I know are super self-aware and are able to read rooms and adjust their behavior based on what they're seeing. High levels of resilience, that can be personal or professional, but low resilience is not a trait that we would be looking for in this job. Gotcha. High level of care and ethics. What are you going to say, yes?
You definitely need resilience in this job.
Brutal. And if you don't have it, you'll learn it very quickly in the first 6 months with a lot of support, which is kind of how I felt about it. Every BD call I'd make, I'd be like, everyone hates me. High level of care and ethics, you know, for the modern day recruiter, treating people how you would like to be treated. This is a project management job more than a sales job nowadays. Strong organizational skills, attention to detail, lots of energy, interested in people, you know, have that natural curiosity to building relationships, commitment to follow through. They're able to push through to an end result, even when things get hard, able to problem solve. You know, for me, the best recruiters have street smarts. You don't necessarily need to know everything about business, but you have to have this natural sense of practicality with how things work in the world and be able to problem solve. And then for me, that extra adds, some of the best recruiters have got side hustles or, you know, have had their own businesses. They have that interest in the commercial aspect of running a business and want to start a career. Those would be my key behaviors. I don't want to spend too long on that, but I'm glad we got to touch on it. And that is pretty much everything that we wanted to share with you guys this lunchtime. You know, ultimately for us, it comes back to that first slide. It's structure and direction, and providing that framework. That is, you know, the lack of that is where we see rookies fail, and we are speaking to them day in, day out, and they need that careful nurturing to be able to be successful. As a modern day recruiter, we know it's not transactional anymore. It's not a case of teaching them how to pick up the phone and giving them a spiel or a pitch. They need to be taught the sophisticated approach of recruitment to be able to operate in this market. So thank you so much for joining us. We do have a handout for you guys, which we can send you, and we will send you some information on our rookie course, which does, we've got intakes in February and March, and they are 50% full at this point. But if anyone has any questions or wants to stay on and have a chat, yeah, we'd love to catch up with you and hear anything else that, that anyone would like to share, or anything that's worked for you, or anything that you want to run past us.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you
that's
so
fine,
much.
doesn't it? An hour really flies by.
I know,
Go
that's
around
right.
the-
Everyone's probably like, God. Oh, thank you for the shout out, Nick. I really appreciate it. And guys, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. So many thanks. I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for coming.